That Old Feeling is the 8th episode of the 5th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it's a pretty decent episode. It gets a little emotional, but not too heavy. It starts off with Blanche coming in. She's had car troubles, and then she says, "I haven't told you my wonderful news. My mother-in-law died." Not exactly what anybody would expect her to say, but she never got along with her. And Blanche is also excited because her late husband George's brother Jamie is flying in to settle the estate. And he arrives, he's played by George Grizzard, and he's a really likeable character. I don't have too many thoughts on his character, but certainly he came across really well, really likeable, and we definitely got some comedy around what is otherwise a heavy subject. Death, as always, is going to be difficult to discuss in some ways, but it was kind of light-hearted in this episode, and they're talking about the will and what the mother-in-law, Blanche's mother-in-law, left behind, and Jamie mentioned that on her deathbed, she kept saying in reference to Blanche, "I want her to have it, I want her to have it," and the implication there is that there's something in the will for Blanche. But no, Jamie clarifies, she was talking about her disease, which is not what I expected him to say. They leave, they go off to spend time together, and Rose is about to go to the grocery store, and her car is missing. And she tells Dorothy, and the phone book is missing, and I was really confused about what on earth could possibly be going on. And then Sophia comes home and says, "No, your car's outside." And it is, it's there. And I didn't realise that Sophia was clutching the phone book until I think it was Dorothy pointed it out. And it turns out she'd been sitting on the phone book in the car, obviously to be able to reach up higher with the steering wheel, and had been driving. And she's not supposed to be driving. And Dorothy was, well, Dorothy said she drove like Mr. Magoo, which I rather is an image I quite like. Mr. Magoo is a brilliant character, but not something anybody would want to be told. It's not exactly a compliment. Blanche then comes home, and she'd had a great time talking with Jamie about George, but she's also enjoying spending time with Jamie. And she's kind of falling for him. And a little while later, Dorothy and Rose are talking about this, and they're basically saying that if Blanche ends up in a relationship with Jamie, she's making a big mistake. And then Blanche walks in the door at that moment and overhears things. And I thought they were going to have a huge argument, but actually they didn't. The situation was diffused quite quickly as they explained that they were just worried about losing Blanche. And Blanche said, "Don't worry about the house, I'll make sure you're okay," even though that's not what actually they're concerned about. Rose wasn't entirely sure what they were concerned about, but that's obviously not the big issue. And she actually suggests that they can all move to Charleston with her. I definitely think she was getting a little ahead of herself there, but nevertheless, she thinks this is a really good idea. Rose and Dorothy still not convinced, and then there's a phone call, and Rose said some really chilling words. "It's the police, there's been an accident." And it was very obvious that this was Sophia. So they have to go and rescue Sophia, and she's fine, she's absolutely fine. But there is a nice lesson there, that if you're not supposed to be driving, if it's not good for you, don't do it, because you could get into an accident. And also don't take people's cars without telling them or asking them, because that's never going to end well either. And then we have the penultimate scene with Blanche and Jamie in a restaurant. And this scene was a little emotional because Blanche finally tells Jamie how she's feeling. And Jamie, I think, said all of the right things, that he does feel things for Blanche, but it's not the kind of love that she's looking for or the kind of love that she needs. And he said, and I love this quote, I think this is a beautiful quote, he said, "You're in love with the memory I brought back to you." And this is further proved when she accidentally calls him George, and she doesn't even realise that she called him George. And I think it's very clear that, yes, while she might like him, and maybe in another lifetime they could have been together, I do feel like she was falling in love with the fact that he very much looked like and resembled her husband, and she was falling in love with that image. And I think it's quite an interesting thought, and I think it's something people might be able to relate to. If your late partner has a sibling who very much reminds you of them, it could be quite a strange experience to spend time around them. And I think it's quite a meaningful scene. And then we end with some comedy. Blanche is very quickly brushing this to one side and is going out to walk by some men to I think she said suck air through their teeth at her, if I remember rightly. So, not a bad way to end things. As I said, it's a little emotional, but it's not too heavy. It's not one of the most emotional episodes. There are some that just draw me to tears immediately, and this isn't one of them. But there were definitely some powerful moments, and ultimately, I came away from this feeling like it was a pretty strong episode. That old feeling is definitely not a bad episode of The Golden Girls, and certainly one that I rather enjoyed.